on 100.1 FM and AM 1020 KDKA. It's Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krause. Talk, listen, and speak to the region's most influential leaders. This is Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krause.
A good Sunday evening, everyone, as we come on the air tonight here on KDKA. This is Today in Pittsburgh Labor. We're broadcasting to you on what is the final Sunday here in June. And I point that obvious statement out to the listening audience because if you will remember, the workers on strike at the Post Gazette, that strike started back in October of 2022. So we are about to click over into the month of July. The unions that make up the workforce at the Post Gazette remain strong in solidarity. And a quick update for everyone. Just recently, the unions proposed and put forth to Block Communications, the owners of the paper, a healthcare proposal where the costs all aligned. The proposal improved the coverages for the workers, and yet the owners of Block Communications refused to sign the participation agreement to get this strike closed. Good evening, everyone. Welcome in. This is Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Thanks very much for being with us here on another Sunday night. We've got a great show lined up for you. Recently inducted into the Legends of Labor Hall of Fame, Sam Pond is an attorney who has dedicated his entire life to serving and helping and supporting union workers, union labor. He will join us after the break, and we'll have a good conversation with Sam. Also, a little bit later on, we'll see what Mayor Ed Gainey has to say on this Sunday night. And a reminder, go to unionprogress.com. It's the digital strike paper online where you can support the members who remain strong in solidarity. This is Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Back in a moment.
This is Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krause.
And back here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in on this Sunday night. As I mentioned when we first came on the air, the Post Gazette strike is now getting ready to click into July. Significant because that strike goes back to October of 2022. And if you really drill down and look at it, the last contract goes all the way back to 2017. Thrilled to have Sam Pond, managing partner of Pond Lahaki, join us tonight on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. He has an office in Pittsburgh, he has an office in Philadelphia, he has multiple offices around the country, and he spends his life helping union workers, looking out for union workers, and we're thrilled to have him tonight, Sam, and welcome into Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Thanks for coming on board.
Yeah, Joe, thanks for having me. It's a real honor to be talking to your audience out in Pittsburgh. We have deep roots in the Steel City, and, as you know, my partner, Joey Lahaki, was born and raised out there, and his two brothers, his older brother and his younger brother, both longtime pipe trades union members, sergeant at arms, and just real happy to be here. I'm listening to and I'm well aware of the Post Gazette strike. Ironically, I worked for the Philadelphia Inquirer, Philadelphia Bulletin as a union member for 9 years, every Friday and Saturday night, and hopefully got a night during the week while I was doing my undergraduate 5-year co-op program at Drexel University, and then for my 3 years at Temple School of Law. And I think I said it the last time I was on one of your shows in regard to those union jobs and being a union laborer before really got me through and paid for my tuition and allowed me to get the education and to do what I do today. So the best of luck. So nice to hear the strength and the sacrifice and the solidarity of those union members out there trying to get a fair shake with the Post Gazette in Pittsburgh.
You know, Sam, I wanted you to, and I wanted to speak with you and get your perspective on it, because I think it's important for the listening audience to sometimes take a step back and listen in a way where they are willing to receive what they hear and perhaps educate themselves a little bit more about the trials and the tribulations of what the workers go through. As I mentioned, your entire life is committed to helping injured union workers. So you understand, perhaps more so than most, you understand how critical it is, how tough it is, how challenging it is, and then throw a strike into the mix where the workers find themselves constantly deflecting actions by Block Communications, the owner of the paper, to bust the union. Bottom line, that's what they want to do. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, of course they want to bust a union, because, you know, the only way that you really get a fair shake, unless you have a benevolent employer that's really fair and has your back and is, you know, not necessarily all corporate, that's willing to sacrifice some of the bottom line so that they have an engaged and protected workforce, then, you know, they want to break the union, because then there's no grievance process. Then you're an employee at will in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, so you can basically be kicked to the curbside at the whim of an employer. You're not going to be able to basically sit down and negotiate. And this is the whole idea of collective bargaining. You take numbers, you take the collective, i.e. the employees, that gives them power, that solidarity, those numbers give power, so that you can able to sit down with a powerful employer to negotiate at arm's length. In other words, it becomes somewhat of a fair dealing in regard to negotiating. Otherwise, there's no negotiations. It's my way or the highway if you're an employer dealing with an employee that doesn't have the protection of a collective bargaining agreement. So, yeah, of course they want to do that, because if they smoke them out and the union gives up, then they don't have to deal with providing an adequate wage, an adequate benefit, an adequate retirement, adequate medical coverage.
What do you make, Sam?
It's that simple.
What do you make of the total disregard of people's lives, the total disregard for complaints that were issued against Block Communications by the Labor Board and found in favor of those complaints that were issued? What do you make of that total disregard? I struggle, Sam, to wrap my arms around the defined and direct action to hurt those workers. I struggle with it so badly.
Yeah, I feel that you're a radio host, and yet you have the empathy and the compassion and the feeling for folks not getting a fair shake. A lot of times it's just who is on that labor relations board, and then the interpretation of the law, the labor laws in regard to the issue, the facts, and. Sometimes those results are really unfair. They're not equitable. But apparently, there's an interpretation of the law based on the evidence by that board. Joe, we see it all the time being in court. You really have to be. That's why you have to be engaged in regard to the process. You have to be engaged in regard to fair-minded, open-minded folks that are making decisions based on the objective findings, the objective evidence. When every time you go to a decision, it's always a bit of a risk. But look, it's the process. And, sometimes it's just not fair. And in my business, in my world, that's where the risk reward comes in counseling union members in regard to the rights. but it's sometimes just not flat out fair.
Talking with Sam Pond, managing partner of Pond Lehocky. He's joining us here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. We're broadcasting to you on KDKA on a Sunday night, and we thank you for tuning in and being a part of Today in Pittsburgh Labor. And again, a reminder, go to unionprogress.com to get the very latest, and also to consume some of the great content that's being put out by a lot of the writers who have some incredible history in this city and in this area, and they continue to do their work. You can also find a button on unionprogress.com to support the workers who remain on strike. Sam, as you know, as your partner Jerry Lehocky knows, as the employees who work in your Pittsburgh office know, the workers that make up the staff at the Post Gazette, many of them, Sam, are generational workers, where their father's father and their father, and they followed in their father's footsteps and became an employee at the Post Gazette. The tenure of the employees that work there is not short on a minute. It's years and years of dedication and commitment to the Post Gazette. Yet, here we are having a conversation about the ownership group wanting to bust the union, and the union trying to get traction, even with the latest health care proposal, and they can't get to the table to get it closed.
Yeah, again, it's the problem sometimes, I think, is, when you start having this, realize this is a war, and there's little battles, and, it's a shifting landscape. And the fact that, it's just so disheartening and just so, Joe, when I worked at the Inquirer, I worked side by side with the people that had, put so many years in there, that had, kind of looking at a retirement and, everything that they worked for. They got out of bed and went there and worked hard, and now with this, just think about the consequence of all this in regard to bleeding this union. It's horrific. People are out on the work, out on the picket line, and then, doing their lawful right to strike, and then you're having videos of them being out there striking, and then misinterpreting them, misrepresenting them. It's just, it's an easy fix on this one. It's an easy fix. Just give them, the whole issue is the health insurance, and just take care of them in regard to the health insurance. We understand the cost of health insurance, but there's ways to deal with this, and it's just a shame because, again, I think that as you said earlier, this is simply, they're using this as an attempt to break this union. Yeah, and there's human beings and their families that are suffering right now as we speak as a result of this.
Sam, the support, runs the entire length of the Pennsylvania Turnpike, from a standpoint of the individuals like yourself and your firm. Congressman Chris DeLuzio, who is from the 17th District, joined us a few weeks ago with his support. We've had so many different elected officials that have been part of the conversation. The general public has come out to support the Post Gazette workers. Yet, despite it all, we can't get there. And I almost want to ask you, before I let you go, when faced with that, what do you do, Sam? What do you do when you're faced with a scenario where everything is lined up to get there and you're being roadblocked?
Yeah, look, I'm not the counsel for the union. I'm sure they've got good counsel. Joe, one of the problems that really I think that, first of all, let me make something very clear. Unions are the most regulated organizations in our country. Not only are they regulated, they are investigated. I mean, it's just beyond belief what they do in regard to the government, putting the unions under the microscope constantly. And in this particular case, I think that you have to understand when folks are out there expressing their rights under the rules of the Labor Relations Board to go out and strike. In other words, they want to strike, they want to be able to express themselves, and they want to make sure that whoever's coming in there, these independent contractors that are doing their job, their livelihood, are aware that they have a presence out there. And then you're automatically going to label the union members as some sort of ruffian, some sort of thugs, and that plays out. That's kind of the PR. This is what I talked to you in the past about. The PR angle, the public relations part of all this, the messaging to get out has to be stronger, and we have to get this image of unions having the wrong image that is being presented by the other side. It's so bad. These are working men and women trying to protect what they've earned and what they've built. And all I can suggest is what I always like to see is obviously punching back in the courts, but also having an opportunity to try to sit down. People ought to try to sit down and bring this. And I know the unions are in this particular case have tried to do that. But again, if the purpose is to break this union, it's very, very difficult to negotiate with that kind of attitude.
Last question for me, and we're talking with Sam Pond, managing partner of Pond Lehocky, here with offices in Pittsburgh. Sam and his team and his partner Jerry Lehocky opened their offices back in 2016 here in the Steel City. So the roots aren't as deep as they are in Philadelphia, but they're deep. They're deep on Jerry's side, and the firm continues to stand tall. I want to leave you, Sam, or leave the audience rather, with a visual understanding, that theater of the mind, and I hope you don't mind talking about it. I mentioned your induction into the Legends of Labor Hall of Fame, and it was an unbelievable event for me to be a part of, because I look at things sometimes differently than everyone else in the room. And the one observation, Sam, that I took with me that night, it's impossible to visualize or to understand the number of lives that you have impacted in a positive way. And you've impacted them from tragedy. That, my friend, is an amazing, amazing thing, and I applaud you for it, and I'd love for you to share a little bit with the audience about it, because I think you're an amazing person.
Well, I'm blushing here. I really appreciate that, Joe, and it was a great night. It's a great honor. It's really very humbling, to say the least. And I guess I look at it, Joe, as I'm a little selfish in this, in that I enjoy it. I mean, I get energy, I get satisfaction, I get honor out of people actually feeling that my professional abilities are good enough to assist them. This week was up in our Northeast office, which is located in a neighborhood that I grew up in, and it's just an honor to be doing it, and to never, and the staff, look, this is always about a collective. It's about Joe Kraus and others that give us a platform to talk to the union community. It's about our wonderful staff. It's about the litigators that we have. It's about being involved in politically, about having legislators listening to our issues. So it's a whole group effort. I just happen to be the first name up there and, get some of these honors. But Joe, it's just wonderful to do the work at a professional as a lawyer, to honor our state constitution, our laws, and to hopefully be a champion for those that are in need and really, are not getting justice. And, at my dinner table, my mother and father always said to me, you have to step in and if you see an injustice. So it's a great honor, to be in this with the three folks before me, to be in that same group is just, almost unbelievable. And I have to pinch myself. But again, it's been a great career. It's not over. It's got a lot more runway, but it's clearly, a team effort.
Sam Pond, managing partner, Pond Lehocky, joining us here tonight. This is Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Back in a moment.
Back to Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krause.
And back here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor as we broadcast to you on this Sunday night here on KDKA, the final weekend in the month of June. Hard to believe that we are getting ready to transition into the month of July. Still talking about the Post Gazette strike, which if you've been an avid listener or a weekly listener to the program or to the podcast, you know that back in October of 2022. And while my math sometimes is shaky, that tells me that we are 8 months in to the strike. The workers remain firm in solidarity. And if we can only get the other side to bargain in good faith, I think we'd be done with this conversation. Joe Pass from Jubileer Pass in Triri, who has a long history of representing labor unions, and he's been a frequent guest of ours here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor because he's in the trenches. He's having the conversations or trying to have those conversations. Joe, thanks for joining us here tonight on Today in Pittsburgh Labor.
Good to be with you again.
Yes, sir. I wanted
these circumstances.
I know. Yep, I hear you, and I appreciate you saying that. I know that there was some, I don't want to say movement because that's the wrong way to, well, maybe that's not the wrong way to say it. From the post or from the union side, a health care proposal was put together, and I wanted to bring you on to talk about that, explain that so the listening audience understands where you are, where the Post Gazette workers are.
Okay, we had, as you know, the employees were thrown out of the health care they had because the employer refused to pay $19 a month, $19 a week, so they could continue with their old health care program. That's what caused the work stoppage. And we were trying to get a program that everyone would agree to, since they didn't want to go back to today. The Post Gazette were refusing to go back to the old program. So I found another healthcare fund that was willing to put us in. And the best part about this is it wouldn't cost the Post Gazette another penny than what they were paying when the work stoppage occurred. They wouldn't even have to pay the additional $19. It was a 100% plan. It wouldn't cost them another dime. And it was, as opposed to the one that the Post Gazette was proposing, they were proposing a 90-10 plan, which would cost the employees about $8,000 a year instead of what they are currently paying, which is about $4,000 a year. So, and it's a 90-10 plan with higher deductibles. So we said, we're not going to take that PG plan because why wouldn't we? We can get something that's much better, a 100% plan at a cheaper rate. So we gave it to them, and they took a look at it and come back and said, well, we would agree to that, but we will not sign a participation agreement. Well, the fund says, in order for you to get the benefits, you have to sign a participation agreement. They made the excuse that the participation agreement references that the trustees have a right to change the program at any time. So I called the administrator of the fund. I said, can you guys do something? Sure. He says, look, we'll send them a letter, which they did, that said that despite what's in the participation agreement, we guarantee that until January 2025, neither the cost of the fund or the benefits will change. Now, are they going to agree to that? Who knows? I doubt it. We're sending out a correspondence to them today asking if they were going to change their mind, because what harm is it from them signing a participation agreement when they can get out of it at any time? And they put that in the fund put that in their letter also. They can get out at any time without a penalty. They won't have any increases in cost, and they won't have any decreases in benefits. We will see what they do.
Joe, help me make sure that I'm processing this correctly. So the new plan that you were able to pull together and present to the ownership group was a plan that kept the insurance at 100%, didn't ask the employer, didn't ask Block Communications for any additional contribution other than what they had already been doing, and they balked at signing that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what they did. This is what we've been doing for 7 years, going into the 7th year. They don't agree to anything unless it's their proposal, which always has a hook to it. For example, their health care proposal is, you agree to our health care proposal, and by the way, we can change it at any time. Hell's fire. That's like having nothing.
Right. And the pushback, or the request is even the wrong way to say this. I'm going to say pushback. And the pushback when you originally submitted it, by the way, thinking that, hey, here it is, let's get this thing wrapped up and over. The pushback is, well, we don't want to sign a participation agreement
with the trust fund.
So then the trust fund creates what's the word I'm looking for? They create an exception, thank you, to that signature that allows or guarantees no increase through into 2025, you said?
January 2025.
Oh my God, Joe, what am I missing? What are the listeners missing here?
I wish I knew. You're missing. What we are missing is your failure to understand. We are dealing with people who do not want to make a deal. Period. They don't. They're robbing this employer. I'd like to know how many millions of dollars they're paying to fight their employees, when this could be settled for, as you can see right now, the health care could be settled for zero additional money.
And the health care, and Joe, the health care issue or the health care conversation is what's fueling this disagreement. Absolutely.
Healthcare is a very, very important issue, and
sure it is.
And obviously it is, always is. But this is amazing. I mean, when we propose this, I said, you can't refuse this. I mean, how can you refuse it? Well, we're not going to sign a participation agreement. Well, that's like saying, I'll buy your house, but I'm not going to sign an agreement that I'm going to buy it.
Right.
Sorry,
So, and we're talking with Joe Pass, who's joining us from the firm of Jubler, Pass, and Intrieri. Just for clarity, Joe, and we'll pick this back up in July. So as of this weekend, the exception has been sent now back to the Block Communications group, and we'll see what happens in terms of a response. Is that where we are now?
Exactly. That's where we are now. Yeah.
All right. Well, Joe, I want to thank you for for everything that you continue to do for labor unions. This one, is so confusing, for a guy like me and for the listening audience here on KDKA. When you really break it down to its simplest form, this thing should be over with that, with what you created with the new fund, or what you were able to secure with the new fund. This should be lights out over, and these workers should be back to work.
Exactly. And we told them we'd come back to work immediately with this.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
all right,
that's
Joe.
the way they are. Well, I've never seen anything like it in my career. I'll tell you that. I've had a long career.
Well, I'll tell you this.
all over the country.
I'll leave you with this, and I'll leave the audience with this. You're not going anywhere, so you'll keep fighting. You'll keep battling through on behalf of all of the workers and the unions that make up the Post Gazette workforce. Joe, thanks a million, man. I appreciate you jumping on.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care.
You got it, man. This is Today in Pittsburgh Labor. We'll take a commercial break. Back in a moment.
It's Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J. Doc and Krause.
And welcome back to Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J. Doc and Krause here on KDKA. Special thanks to the Legends of Labor Hall of Fame inductee Sam Pond, and then a big shout out and a big thanks to Joe Pass from Jubileer Pass in Trierry, who took a time to lay out where we are. Go back and listen to that segment if you missed any of it. We are at the point in this process where this strike is over, should be over, yet for some reason the company refuses now to sign an agreement for the new health care proposal, which increases their outlay by zero. Think about that. Today in Pittsburgh Labor on KDKA, on behalf of all of the workers who remain in solidarity to the Post Gazette crew and the unions that make up the Post Gazette. I'm Joe Krause. See you next time, everybody.
The proceeding was paid for by Jacob Media Partners. Information on the program was intended to solely further the public's general knowledge about the product. Opinions expressed should not be relied upon for any purpose by any member of the audience. News Radio KDKA does not guarantee the accuracy of any of the information heard on the preceding program.